Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate your time. I just got back from Boston. I was at the State House all day long. And I actually spoke with my state senator and my state reps about the Attorney General's ruling, which caused an assault weapon ban fiasco here in the state. So stick by and check it out. Here's my interview with State Senator Ryan Fattman. I'm here meeting with Senator Ryan Fattman out of Sutton. Sir, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll start by just introducing myself. My name is Jared Yanis. I live at 22 Manchog Road in Douglas. We've spoken over the years a couple times electronically, but thank you for meeting face to face.
Absolutely.
Father of four, three of them are autistic, and retired police officer, firearms instructor.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. So what has happened within the last 10 days with the Attorney General's reinterpretation of a law has a lot of people upset. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us about it.
My pleasure.
So I'll ask you a couple questions. Take however long you need or however short you need to respond. And if you want to branch off of that, feel free.
Sure.
Thank you. So the first one is, when we're all young, we learned that the Constitution has divided the government into three branches: the legislative, executive, and the judiciary. And each has specific powers to ensure that no one branch has too much power. The Attorney General falls within the executive branch, yet she took it upon herself to reinterpret an 18-year-old law and change what Massachusetts' assault weapon ban was overnight. Many believe the Attorney General's action was an overreach. What do you think, sir?
I absolutely think what the Attorney General did was an overreach. If you look at the legislative process and how it's supposed to work, you propose an idea, and over the course of several weeks, months, and even years, that idea is vetted. People speak in opposition, people speak in support, experts come and testify, and they do this because they want to make sure they get laws right. In 1998, we passed a law in this state that you're aware of that essentially banned certain types of assault weapons, or banned assault weapons. And after two attorney generals, technically you could argue even three attorney generals, 5 governors, 4 out of the 5 of which were Republicans, all the attorney generals were Democrats, none of them ever did what she did, right, which was totally reinterpret the law, issuing the statement about copycat weapons, and essentially making people felons in waiting. So I think there's 2 parts to this. The first part is process. The process was an aberration, and it should have never happened. The second is the Second Amendment, right? The right to bear arms. In my opinion, she's violated both of those, and it's something that we need to work on legislatively.
Thank you. To touch on what you guys just spoke about, during the 10 years that the federal assault weapon ban was actually law before the sunset, 0 of 2 federal attorney generals and their staff found these weapons didn't violate the assault weapons ban. 0 of 2 ATF directors and their staff determined there was no violation. 0 of 136 state attorney generals and their staff found no violations. And then following the sunset of the federal assault weapon ban in 2004, 7 states plus the District of Columbia continued to maintain an assault weapons ban. And during that time, 0 of 18 state attorney generals or their staff within these assault weapon ban states, 2 of which prior to Ms. Healy in Massachusetts, found that these did not violate the assault weapon ban. How is it, in your opinion, that in 22 years and over 158 state and federal law enforcement professionals, no one ever considered these weapons to be illegal, but Maura Healey does?
Well, that's what's so troubling, is when you give someone all this type of power, they can do whatever they want. That's why I think it really is a smack in the face of democracy, and it really is a usurpation of power. No one individual should ever have this type of power. If we had a monarchy, maybe that would be different, but as a nation, 240 years ago, we decided that that wasn't right for us and we needed to change it, and we fought a pretty bloody war, neighbor against neighbor, about it. And in the process of doing so, came up with the Bill of Rights. People say, the first is the most important, the freedom of speech, religion, press, and that the second was put in place to defend the first. And so for me, that's really what it comes down to. I mentioned before that we've had 3 attorney generals who, since 1998, have been in office in our state and have never taken this step. All 3 of those are Democrats. We've had 5 governors, 4 out of the 5 of which are Republicans, Deval Patrick being the Democrat. They've never done anything about this. 2 years ago, we had a significant and contentious debate about gun legislation to try to make Massachusetts a safe place and also try to balance that with the people's rights. And at that point, this didn't really come up. So you just kind of wonder how you pull something out of thin air and say, here's the authority to do that. It's just not right. I don't understand how she can do it. And I think the tides are turning on her based on the last 10 days. You've seen Democrats start to speak out. We filed legislation to basically take this ability of the Attorney General away. And we've had numerous Democrats sign on to it. So it's a bipartisan issue.
Thank you. I've been following it tooth and nail. I know your time is important. I just have 4 more for you. When she issued this notice, Maura Healey immediately placed thousands of law-abiding citizens in fear of becoming felons overnight because they purchased these weapons in good faith over the years. While the Attorney General has said she hasn't cited anyone yet, to use her term, there have been no official guarantees that these people are free from ex post facto law. Not one district attorney has gone on record saying that they wouldn't charge. What guarantees could you, if you can, make to the people?
And in fact, one district attorney came out and applauded what she did, probably because he doesn't understand what she did. And that's, I think, what we have to convey as the largest message. People don't necessarily understand. If you own a gun, you're paying attention, right? Because they've infringed upon your rights. But there's a lot of people out there in Massachusetts who don't. There's a lot of people who believe that an assault weapon is a machine gun. We know that not to be the case. You know, these types of mistruths are conveyed in public media all the time. So what we need to do is have a fact-based analysis and message. And so the facts are this. The Attorney General has done something where she came out and said that what you have been doing for the last 18 years legally is no longer legal. So your purchasing of an AR-15 or a semi-automatic SIG, those things that you were purchasing legally over the course of the last 18 years, well, that's actually no longer legal. So not only can they not be sold, but they can't be owned. So a lot of people sit there and they scratch their head and they say, okay, well, what about me? What happens if I get pulled over for speeding and someone sees my AR-15 in the back seat, locked obviously, but in my possession, can I be arrested? And the answer is we don't know. Yes, she has said she won't prosecute anybody, but what happens if the next Attorney General comes in after hopefully she leaves office in the next few years and is more aggressive? What happens if a district attorney decides they want to act? What happens if someone goes to renew their license after 6 years? I have my license to carry, and they're denied because they own. They're asked, do you own one of these weapons, a copycat? The other thing is she won't even name specifically what a copycat weapon is. Right. So how is anybody supposed to know? And lastly, the thing that I think troubles me the most is it always troubles you when it hits home. This has essentially made potentially me and my entire family felons in waiting. And let's talk about felonies. A felony for the first offense in this is 10 years in prison. At the third offense, I believe it's 50 years, essentially life. That's unacceptable. And how broad is it? Well, she talked about operating systems. So if a semi-automatic weapon, rifle, that operating system is the same for, say, my SIG Mosquito, that's a semi-automatic handgun, then that handgun may be illegal. Correct. There's constitutional problems there because DC versus Heller said that people have a right to have a handgun, almost unquestionably. And so when DC tried to ban handguns from the city. Right. So, I have a major problem when somebody says that my brother-in-law is now a felon because of something that he did completely legal, or my father-in-law, or even potentially myself. And it's not going to stand. We're going to fight the good fight, and we'll hopefully keep you updated on that.
Well, plus there's also a federal appeals court that has ruled that Americans have a fundamental right to the AR system. So right. They didn't find that it violated anything that the founders developed. Okay, I know you're short on time. So I have a few friends that work for Smith & Wesson. And with this new ban on semi-automatic sporting rifles, many of these people could lose their jobs due to sales dropping. In fact, everyone who works there that had an order was forced to cancel their order, so they couldn't even purchase from their own company because of this ban. These people want to know how long it'll take to overturn the Attorney General's rogue action so that they don't have to be in fear of losing their careers, and how can we help ease these fears?
Yeah, and that, unfortunately, for the next few weeks and months, I don't think we're going to be able to answer that question. I think that this is going to hurt businesses. There was, after she announced it Wednesday, I forget the exact date, but she announced this on a Wednesday, and it went into effect on Thursday, and people ran to their local vendors and bought guns so they could legally own them and they'd be sold. But you got to wonder about the guy who bought all this inventory and now is stuck with it, potentially being in violation of the law. What does he do? There's also a question about property. If I own it and it's now illegal, well, aren't you technically diminishing my property value? Aren't you technically taking away my property? And but unfortunately, I think, is Smith & Wesson out in Springfield?
Yes.
Yeah, and unfortunately for those people, this is going to have a negative consequence. And this is why we have a process, a legislative process, because over the course of time, we can vet these problems and see unintended consequences come forward when people testify. But unfortunately, that is not what happened here. And as much as the legislative process can really frustrate me, especially as a Republican in this state, it also reassures me that we have a process for a reason and that process should be honored. And unfortunately, it wasn't. People's jobs may be at stake because of it.
Terrible. The fifth one, Maura Healey's enforcement notice and her subsequent statements regarding the situation were all, and continue to be, very vague. All it would take is another reinterpretation from her to make any magazine-fed firearm illegal, like you said, since its action is similar to the semi-automatic rifles that she spoke about. How can this be allowed, first off, and how can her actions not be interpreted as an infringement on our civil rights and the Second Amendment for the rights of the Commonwealth?
Yeah, as I've stated, I think it is an infringement, but I also think that, if legislative action is not taken in the next few days, that there's a reasonable case that can be made in federal court. And what I've heard about is, someone, a group like Goal, Gun Owners Action League, coming in and filing some sort of injunction in federal court to immediately suspend what she's doing. And that way people can have more flexibility until we actually define what it is she's talking about. Because to say, to be sitting here and saying that I purchased this pillow, legally, and then all of a sudden tomorrow to say it's illegal and I still own it and it's dangerous, it makes no sense. So my hope is, if we don't get any traction here in the legislature over the next 2 days before the legislative session ends, that in the courts we can have some impact and injunctive relief.
And the last one, sir, I run a YouTube channel. It's called Guns and Gadgets. It's pro Second Amendment, where I do a lot of training. I've been getting phone calls from around the country for this specific question, and I actually took it from somebody. So there are a lot of people who want this one, if you can answer it.
Sure.
Finally, I personally have called the governor's office 3 times. And while in the beginning they were very interested in who was calling, now it's just turned into they're taking notes and they're just going to tally who feels what.
Right.
This demands immediate action. Obviously, the nation is watching. It's the Second Amendment. And why do you think Governor Baker has remained silent so far?
Well, I think in the beginning he probably said some things that he regretted. My understanding, and I wasn't there, was that he had made some comments that sounded like he was supportive of what Maura Healey did on a show called Jim and Marjorie Egan. And he has now kind of stepped back away from that position because he was talking about the original assault weapons ban. And he sent a letter to Maura Healey, and his Secretary of Public Safety, Dan Bennett, also sent a letter just saying, what does this mean, essentially? How does this coincide with the law that was passed in 1998? How does this coincide with the AW ban? And, how are you going to, can you be specific? And the Secretary of Public Safety said, we need specificity. What type of guns are you talking about? He was sort of the first person to actually write a letter and ask the Attorney General directly about these things. Many people have followed in the footsteps, including people like Hank Naughton, who's the chairman of Public Safety in the House, a Democrat, John Fernandez, who asked a lot of questions to help define and eliminate the ambiguity. It would be wonderful, to have everybody who has written a letter come out and say unequivocally, I support the Second Amendment. It is a fundamental right, and what you have done is infringed upon it. But unfortunately, that's just not the case, and a lot of times it's not the case because it doesn't either affect them in their personal lives. They don't actually own a firearm or a rifle, and they don't practice their Second Amendment. And a lot of times that can mean people are ignorant to the law itself. So my hope is that the governor will continue to push and to continue to ask questions and get these questions answered from the Attorney General, and hopefully that there's enough pot stirring amongst the governor's staff and the legislature that we can get this law suspended and say, have her say, mea culpa, I made a mistake here, I didn't know what I was talking about, and we need to go through their process as every other piece of legislation would.
Well, thank you for your time, sir. For everybody watching, this is Senator Ryan Fattman, who's next town over me in Sutton, Massachusetts. Thank you. I'm glad we have you on our side.
Great honor of representing Douglas, Sutton, Webster, Hopedale, Mendon, Milford, Bellingham, Blackstone, Millville, Southbridge, Dudley, Oxford. I'm trying to make sure I didn't leave anything out there. Northbridge.
Just a couple.
Yeah, so 14 towns, and they're wonderful, and they're people who practice their Second Amendment rights. Maybe they're sportsmen, maybe they're gun enthusiasts, but what they've done is perfectly legal over the course of the last 18 years, and that should be the way it is.
All right, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.